Hey everybody, today I'm sharing 3 watercolor painting ideas for your sketchbook with you. The first one is something that I don't believe that I've done before, and it is to paint these weather icons. I have done page spreads where I have painted different kinds of suns and stuff like that, but never really these kinds of weather icons, the ones you would find maybe in a weather app. And I just painted all of them with watercolors in my own style. And I had a lot of fun with this one because it's something that I don't do as much. It's a somewhat different idea for me, and you can really play around with the different colors and with the different designs. You can make them all fit together and be in the same style, or you can play around and create different ones. I created different kinds of these thermometers. I have played around a little bit with watercolors and the wet on wet technique. You could also try to make these icons look a little bit cleaner without any watercolor effects. Really, this is up to you. You can just focus on one kind of weather, maybe just rain or just stars or just the sunshine, or you could do it like I did here with all different kinds of weather and all different kinds of icons that could mean different things. We have a sunset, we have a thermometer that says that it's warm, one that says that it's cold, we have wind and snow, we have lightning, rainbows, everything that I could come up with and would fit my page. I tried to fill the page and kind of create a good composition with everything, and so this also played a role in picking what kinds of icons I would be able to fit. So I'm sure there's a lot that I didn't get to do here because they just wouldn't fit, because I had already filled the page a lot. But I'm really happy with how it turned out. If I were to do it again, I might pick a little bit more of a cohesive color scheme. I feel like I use pretty much every color in my palette here, and usually I try to limit myself a little bit when it comes to colors, and that usually makes the pieces pop a little bit more, make them look a little bit more cohesive. Or if I use every color, I often go in rainbow order, and here it's kind of a little bit all over the place. I try to make it all look a little bit cohesive by spreading out the colors. So we have a little bit of the turquoise in every corner of the page, and a little bit of the purple or the yellow just spread around a little bit, so that way it all goes together a little bit more, if that makes any sense. But yeah, I really loved playing around with this, and you could do these icons a lot bigger. You could just fit a few of those on one page, or maybe even just do one per page. If you want to quickly fill a sketchbook, then doing one of these per page would really get you going. You could make it a series, do a rainbow on one page and a sunrise on another page. And yeah, you could play around with this idea a lot, is what I'm saying. And I'm painting in my Hahnemühle 100% cotton watercolor sketchbook here, so I really have the ability to use the watercolors to their advantage and use a lot of wet on wet techniques and layer them a little bit. And so having a watercolor book really makes a lot of sense if you're using a lot of wet media. So if you love to paint with watercolors, gouache, stuff like that, then I really recommend getting a specific watercolor sketchbook. And not just, I know a lot of people love using mixed media sketchbooks, and I mean, it depends on what you're going for, what your style is, and what your preferences are. But I personally don't really like using mixed media sketchbooks for watercolors and gouache or really wet mediums, because you can't really play around with your colors as much. You can't really do do as much of the wet on wet technique, and mixed media paper usually dries much quicker, which can be a pro and a con depending on what you want to do. But in my case, when I use watercolors, I don't want the paint to dry too quickly because I want to be able to blend stuff and just play around with the colors. So if you want to recreate these things, then I would suggest using a watercolor sketchbook, or you could also paint on separate sheets of watercolor paper and then stick them into your sketchbook later if you have a sketchbook that doesn't really have that great of a paper. I used to do that a lot when I was filling mixed media sketchbooks, just gluing stuff in there. I know they got pretty thick in the end, but I just much prefer working on paper that I feel comfortable with. But honestly, of course, you can do whatever you want. If you like to work on mixed media paper, there's no harm in that. You're not doing anything wrong. There's no specific rules in art, which is what I really love about it. And every artist has their own preferences. I'm just sharing what works really well for me and what I prefer to do. And so far, I really like this book, especially for watercolors. So here is the finished page. I'm fairly happy with how it turned out. And now on the right side, I was using a ruler just to map out what I wanted to do, because I'm drawing a perfume bottle here. And now I'm using my custom watercolor palette. A lot of different brands are in this one. And on the left page, I was using the White Nights watercolor palette. Honestly, you can do these things with any kinds of watercolors. Just use what you have. And here you can see that at first I just sketched the perfume bottle and I left it as a sketch, and then I painted some flowers over it. And I wanted to have this effect where the flowers would kind of be the background and the perfume bottle would just be sketched with a pen in the foreground. So you will see me do that later. And I was really trying to keep it as light as possible. That's why I was using my custom palette, because the White Nights, they tend to be very, very pigmented. So I go into very dark colors very easily and quickly. But also with this custom palette, I still went into pretty dark colors pretty quickly. I tried to stop myself and stick with very light colors and not add too many details, which was actually hard for me. I love adding tiny little details and a lot of shadows, but it wouldn't really work that well with the idea that I had here. So I was really trying to contain myself here. And if I were to do this piece again, I would probably change the color scheme a little bit. I don't know. I'm not 100% happy with how this turned out. I like the concept of it. So I might try something similar again in the future. And I don't know how I came up with this idea, honestly. I just really wanted to draw some kind of bottle and have a lot of colors on the page as well. And so I did this. And yeah, I think there's room for improvement with this piece, but I don't exactly know how I would improve it, or in specific areas what I would change specifically. I might, if I try something like this again, I might plan the flowers and everything a little bit more, so I make sure that all of the shapes look really good, because honestly, adding a lot of details has kind of become my comfort zone, because if you add a lot of details to your pieces, they usually look better and a little bit more finished and a little bit better executed. I mean, not always, but usually adding a lot of details really helps. And so this has kind of become my comfort zone. And here I really had to stop myself from adding too many details. And you can really see every single thing that I don't like as much about it, because I didn't really add that many details. Honestly, I think that even the details that I added were a little bit much. I have these grapes here because I was looking at a few inspiration pictures with themes of perfume bottles, and I saw something with grapes. I don't know what they would do in a perfume, but they're here, and also some flowers. I didn't want to do just flowers, but honestly, looking back at it, I would probably prefer it with just flowers. And yeah, you can see I'm using a pen now, and I am enforcing the sketch with the pen and drawing over that and trying to make it pop, but the painting is a little bit too dark for what I had in mind, so it doesn't pop as much as I wanted it to. But yeah, now I'm using some white gouache. I really wanted that label to stand out a little bit more, and I wanted to make the perfume bottle look a little bit more like glass. So I was using watered down white gouache, and it dried much more transparent than it looked originally. So I did another layer of that, so I could make it look a little bit more three-dimensional, and it's still see-through. You can still see the pattern through it. And yeah, it's an okay piece. So this is what the page spread looks like now. I really like the ideas in this page spread. And then my last idea for today is to paint an object that you find in your home, something that is in the area where you usually create. In this case, I was using one of my plants that I have in a vase, and I just wanted to keep it simple and loose and play around with the wet on wet technique and really keep myself from adding too many details and really just play around with a more loose and expressive style. So I started off with a fairly big brush for me. I love to use tiny little detail brushes, but when I have a bigger brush, I'm forced to not go overboard with the details. And so that's what I was doing here. And I used a lot of different green tones for the plant. I was using warmer tones and then a little bit of a more phthalo blue and just different kinds of tones, yellow, blues, greens. Everything goes for a plant, especially if you want to add a lot of texture. So you can see here with the stem, I was really playing around with the wet and wet technique, which just basically means that you put more fresh wet paint into your already wet paint, so it kind of bleeds together a little bit and you can create all those fun effects with that. And I think this piece was fairly quick, so if you're looking for something that is rather quick, you could even simplify it down a lot. You don't have to create very complex stems and roots. You could simplify this idea a lot and it would still look cute. I always say that painting plants, they're a very forgiving subject, because even if they don't turn out the way that they really look in real life, and if the proportions are off, it's not as big of a deal as if you were to paint a portrait or something where the stakes are much higher in getting the proportions right. So if you're looking for a simple piece to create to just enjoy the process and have fun with it, then plants are always a good go-to. And this specific plant is in a vase with water in my office, and it has been living like this for a while now. I used to have the mother of this plant in a pot, but then the plant had some kind of health issue. Honestly, I don't remember if it was a pest or if the plant had some kind of sickness. Something was off, probably with the soil, and so I put it into this vase with water just for a short period of time to let it recover, and it's been a few years and the plant is still in here and it looks cute and it's still alive. So this is the last page for this video. For more fun and creative art ideas, check out this video next.